And hello, folks.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Totally Tanked, the tankiest podcast in Tankville. I'm Rob.
And I'm John, and this is episode 74, recording and streaming live on 20 September 2025. And today we're talking about the M10 Wolverine, controversial, I know, tank destroyer, plus a little about its oft-overlooked cousin, the Achilles, and even a smidge about its butterfly form of the M36 Jackson. And just as we're getting started,
You skipped a bit there.
a big hello to the Germans in Baden-Württemberg who have been clobbering the downloads this month. Guten Tag to you all. All right, Rob, tell us some more about the M10.
All right, the 3-inch gun motor carriage M10 or M10 GMC, or one I like to, from the Tank Encyclopedia, unofficially, retroactively, and erroneously known as the Wolverine.
Now, hang on. I'm going to argue with the Tank Encyclopedia here. The manufacturer definitely called it the Wolverine in advertising material.
Yep.
There is some say, oh, no soldier ever called it the Wolverine. It's like, yeah, you don't know that. Some soldier might have called it the Wolverine.
The name Wolverine was used in some prize lads, but never used by the troops themselves.
Well,
it was the first.
Never's too strong.
It was
rarely.
First fully armed, fully tracked tank destroyer of the US Army. And 1,650 of them were given to the Brits, who replaced the 3-inch gun with a 17-pounder anti-tank gun in 1,100 of those 1,600. And called their version, the 17-pounder, self-propelled Achilles.
Achilles is a good name for an armoured vehicle.
Well, they for their 17-pounder armed guns, they went with all the A names, so Achilles, Archer.
Gotcha.
There were some other ones I can't remember off the top of my head, but I read them the other week. All right.
Hang on, just quickly. On the chat, we've got Hans Vormhat, who's got cold one cracked and one on deck.
And Meowdy all to brand and make stuff.
Yes,
Meowdy, that's
Meowdy indeed.
from Super Troopers, Meow.
Okay, all right, excellent. All right, and apparently there's a few people on the view. Good to see you all. Get in on the chat. Tell us where you are, who you are.
And make sure
we want to see you.
And all our tech is. Let us know if all our tech's going good or bad.
Oh, well, it looks like it's going great. And just quickly, the reason we're doing the M10, even though we've been in a bit of a World War II rut for the last few months, is our young friend Britta, who we met at Osama Fest, requested this one.
Yep.
So,
big shout
yes,
out to
any 15-year-olds who make it to a tank festival we're at get to request an episode. We'll just,
wearing our t-shirts and
t-shirts important,
and even dragging his dad along to the pub so he could come hang out with us.
Yeah. A very sheepish dad following his 15-year-old into the pubs of Cairns. We appreciate both of your efforts.
That was great. All right, stats. It's a type of a self-propelled anti-tank gun produced. The M10 was produced from September 1942 to December 1943. The M10A1 was produced from October 1942 to November 1943. So they're built concurrently, 1 month behind.
But it was purely the A1s were converted into the Jacksons. So they only took from the later hulls for those.
And hello to Obliteron from Portland.
There we go. I think we got a few Portland folks on the line.
Dry saison rice beer. Oh, you have to tell us about that one, John.
We've got an Oregon kind of vibe, I guess. We've got the e-bikes just next door. We've got the. My beard's a little short these days, but anyway, let's move on.
All right. So they were both built concurrently. Both versions were converted into the Achilles. There were 6,406 built, and we're assuming 1,100 of those. That number was the Achilles as well. So not an extra 1,100 of those. But
6,000 produced is okay. It's not a T-34, but that's a lot of a vehicle to be quite as obscure as this one.
Most produced US Army tank destroyer of the war. So there you go.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the M18 was a better vehicle in every way, but let's keep going on this one.
Yeah, that's right. And
Alan Desmond's joined us.
So was Jonas.
Oh, yeah.
Jonas Golden, same as Obliteron. So I'm assuming he's hanging out in Portland.
Yeah.
Drinking saison rice beer.
You guys should book out a pub and
get some t-shirts. Have a watch party.
Send us some photos. Yeah.
All right. It weighed 29.6 tons. The length was 19 feet 7 inches, or 22 feet 5 inches with the gun, with the 17-pounder being another foot long for the barrel. 10 feet wide and 9 foot 6 inches high. Crew of 5, commander, gunner, loader, driver, and assistant driver. Even though the assistant driver I don't think they actually had any assistant drivery bits. But
no, I mean, they have to have a seat for them, and the driver, as we've discovered at Osama Fest, once again, driving tanks is exhausting, and you do need to be able to swap them over.
And they didn't even have a bow gun for the assistant.
No, they deleted that for weight and to stop them getting used as tanks.
Armour very thin, with only 2.25 inches on the mantlet, being the thickest, much thinner than the M4 Sherman it was based on. So the main gun, which is the 3-inch gun, the M7, carrying 54 rounds, or the Achilles had the 76.2 millimeter ordnance, the 17-pounder with carrying 50 rounds. Secondary armour was the 50 cal Mardus with 300 rounds, or on the Achilles they carried slightly more ammo at 420 rounds, as well as a Bren light machine gun, which I'm assuming was carried in the vehicle and not mounted in any way. So,
I mean, it is an open-top vehicle, so if you're just hanging around in your open-top turret with your Bren gun, you can hose some baddies down.
Throw out 20 rounds a moment for each clip.
Yeah, I mean, but Bren you'd fire in short bursts.
Anyway, so the engine was on the M10 was the GM twin diesel with 375 horsepower, or on the M10A1 was the Ford V8 petrol engine, producing 450 horsepower.
Although it should be noted, as we've hinted at, it was based on the M4 Sherman chassis, so in theory they could have...
One I'm wearing on my T-shirt?
In theory they could have put a more conventional Sherman engine in, but for...
Well, no, the Sherman engines by that stage of the war were the GMs and the Fords. So they moved away from the radial 9 Continentals.
But they were stuck with the enormous, silly chassis.
Yes.
But anyway.
They still had they had the whole shape. It was a case of what engine. They were no longer... well, actually, they probably were still throwing in Continentals as a case of whatever they could get off the production line.
I still think 450 horsepower is a little on the light side, and I think the combat record indicated that people agreed that it was a bit underpowered for what they wanted. But,
I mean, it was slightly faster than the tanks that were supporting, which was the whole idea of their tank destroyers. Anyway, transmission had synchro mesh, 5-speed forward and 1 reverse. Suspension was the vertical Voluette spring suspension, or twin bogies.
Vertical Volute.
Volute.
That's twin VVSS.
Yep. Fuel capacity for the M10 was 165 US gallons, or the A1 was 192 US gallons, which gave it an operational range of 200 miles for the M10, so using less fuel, less diesel, or the A1 was only 160 miles.
That's quite funny that the A1 with a much bigger fuel tank had a much shorter operational range.
Yep.
But,
and the Achilles is given a longer range, but I don't really believe that, as they had the same engine, the same fuel tanks. So there was no external fuel tanks or anything added on, so...
Yeah. Now, Alan is asking in the comments, did tank destroyer crews make field tops for bad weather? We are going to get to that. It's a bit complicated, but essentially, yes.
Yes, we'll get to that. Anyway, maximum speed, 20 to 30 miles per hour on road, or for the M10, or 30 miles per hour on road for the A1. So, as I said, slightly faster than the M4 Shermans. Design and development. The US Army came up with a concept for a tank destroyer that would be able to get a gun to where it needed to be that could destroy a tank. They started out with a towed 37mm gun.
Not enough.
Then a 37mm gun mounted on a 3/4-ton truck.
Not enough.
Then they went to a 75mm gun mounted on the back of an M3 half-track. After the fall of France.
I mean, that's just such a grim, cobbled-together solution. And you got to remember, the US Army had created an entire branch of the Army, the tank destroyer branch, to try and use this tank destroyer doctrine they had come up with purely based on the fall of Poland and France, saying we have to figure out how to stop German armoured thrusts. And quite sensibly, they said that a simple cordon of anti-tank guns was a bad idea because the enemy could punch through it with a concentration of force.
So the French had all their anti-tank guns up in the line and nothing in depth.
Yeah. So the idea is you hold your tank destroyers in large echelons in reserve, and then when the enemy makes their armoured thrust, then you rush your tank destroyers up to the flanks of the enemy thrust and squeeze off the shoulders of their incursion. Quite a sophisticated theory. Would have been really great if the US Army had fought in the first half of World War II, but fundamentally by the time the US Army was arriving in numbers...
They didn't have anything to fight with in the first...
Oh, they didn't have the vehicles.
They had the M2 mediums and lights, which had machine guns. They would have achieved nothing.
Yeah.
Or the towed 37mm guns. Anyway, and hello to Tasman. Welcome from Sydney. So after the fall of France in 1940, the towed 37mm gun was determined not mobile enough to counter the swiftly moving German forces and not powerful enough to penetrate the increasing armour being seen on the Panzer IVs. They wanted to build a dedicated, fully tracked and fully armoured tank destroyer, but they did not have a design available that met the requirements. So instead, they took the hull, engine and running gear of the M4 medium and developed a turret that could accommodate the 3-inch gun. This became the M10 tank destroyer. However, by installing the bigger 3-inch gun, the weight of the vehicle would increase and its speed would be affected. And one of the main requirements of the tank destroyer was that it would be slightly faster than the tanks it was supporting.
And there is an issue with the gun in this, that it was a big 3-inch gun, which only translates to 76.2 millimeters. And they basically had this huge logjam of very different weapons that were all converging on 76.2 at the middle stage of the war. So that's one of the reasons why they gave them names like 3-inch, even though they're 76.2. But it was a very heavy gun, and it wasn't actually very powerful, considering the weight that it had to be supported. So, I mean, it was very much an interim weapon, and as the war went on, they put better guns in this vehicle to deal with that.
All right, to deal with this issue, the armour was significantly decreased from the M4, which started with 2 inches of armour on the front, 3 inches on the turret, and 1.5 inches on the sides, to the M10, which only had 1.5 inches of armour on the front, 2.25 on the turret, and only 3/4 of an inch of armour on the sides. This allowed the M10 to be fast enough, 30 miles per hour versus the 24 for the M4, to outpace the tanks it was supporting. However, the decrease in armour worried the crews, so rather than the flat side armour of the M4, the side armour of the M10 was sloped at 38 degrees to increase the thickness.
And it made it a very modern looking vehicle. Like, for those on the video on screen right now, or we've just gone off, you know, it looks kind of like a Bradley with the hull shape. So it looks really cool and futuristic for 1942, but it was still fundamentally an M4 chassis that had some things done to it, and an engine that wasn't quite powerful enough, and a gun that was too heavy for its own turret. So yeah,
all right,
issues.
Yeah. so that would increase the sloped armour would increase the thickness of the side armour, but it was also sticking out over the sides of the tracks, and this made the vehicle 40 centimetres wider than the M4. And an extra logistical consideration when moving the M10, it didn't stop it from didn't become a logistical issue for them, but it was another consideration that they had to work with. The Army also added bolts or bosses on the hull, so they could easily bolt on extra applique armour if it was found to be necessary.
It was a real fitted for, not with kind of thing. I know other users did put the applique on, but yeah.
The US Army didn't end up using the applique armour on the M10s and actually stopped putting on the bosses later on in the production run. Another issue was the hexagonal turret was a manual traverse, taking up to 80 seconds to go all the way around.
If it could turn at all.
Yeah,
and which we're going to get to. I just want to say quickly, we have got a poll going where the options are that the M10 was a poorly conceived tank or the right vehicle at the right time. At the moment, we are 80% on the right vehicle at the right time, but you folks coming on the live stream, get to vote.
Come on, let's influence these votes. If you want your vote to come in higher, make sure you throw some money. No.
Brandon makes stuff is noting that the angled turret with the rear wings really does look like Wolverine the X-Man.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Interesting.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. So it would take 80 seconds to traverse all the way around, and the front-loaded weight of the gun meant that if the vehicle was on any sort of slope
of more than 4 degrees, which is not a lot.
No, any sort of slope. The crew could not traverse the gun because it was too heavy with the manual traverse. You just couldn't wind that little flywheel hard enough to spin the turret around. To fix this issue, extra weight was installed at the rear of the turret to balance out the gun.
Which is destroying the whole purpose of the tank destroyer concept, to have a turret that's got pathetically limited armour on it, and then instead of increasing the armour, to just throw weights on the back to try and balance the gun. It was a god-awful clutch in funny ways.
First, they started out by storing the track grousers at the rear, and then they added a 2,400-pound lead slab with steel straps. Well, actually, it was two lead slabs.
So 2,400 pounds is around a ton in real measurements, but yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be 2,200. 2,200 pounds to the ton.
Yeah.
Then they installed a wedge-shaped heavy counterweight of 3,700 pounds.
So closer to 2 tons.
Yep.
But yeah.
And finally, a duck-billed counterweight of 2,500 pounds that, due to the shape, was able to place the weight further away from the turret to balance it out, so you could traverse the turret on any sort of slope. So, having shaved off the armour, they then added weight onto the added weight back onto the vehicle to balance the turret. And to save more weight, they also removed the hull bow machine gun and the coax machine gun that would normally come with a Sherman. This was also done so they would not be used as tanks in support of infantry. The turret was open top to enable greater visibility, making it more likely the M10 would see the enemy first and get off the first shot, which usually became the first kill. However, this made the Wolverine more vulnerable to sniper fire, mortars, bursting artillery, hand grenades, and the weather.
And Molotov cocktails as well. Yeah.
Liquid inflammatories was the Russian words for it. A thin armoured roof was made later in the war, but it did not enclose the turret, sitting some inches above the hull, allowing the crew to still have good visibility and providing some overhead protection.
That's not a bad compromise, and I think with cupola hatches, they called it closed, open protected or something like that, where they would sit a few inches up, and so the commander could look around, and these roofs they put on gave a similar sort of thing in that it stopped stuff falling on it. It became a very lucky shot that would come through the gap, but it gave good visibility. Yeah.
Production of the M10 with the twin diesel engine started in September of 1942, with the M10A1 with the Ford V8 starting a month later. The two models were made concurrently through to the end of 1943 in order to meet Army production requirements. The need for the tank destroyers was seen as critical, and the production of the M10 was given priority over other armoured vehicles, including the M4.
When you've got a whole branch of the Army that doesn't have an actual vehicle to fulfil its role, you've got a big problem. So, yeah.
If only I had such high-tech chicken wire from the future. Yes, the coke cages.
Okay,
anyway,
Rob,
the Brits...
audience, Rob. Audio audience.
All right. The Brits had been trying to design trying to design a low-silhouette turreted self-propelled anti-tank gun able to survive against a German 5cm gun at 800 metres, but had not come up with a successful design by the time they got hold of the M10 in 1943. The 3-inch gun of the M10 was more powerful than the British 6-pounder anti-tank gun.
I mean, you'd hope so, given it was massive, much more big. It was huge. The bore diameter, not so much, but it was a much bigger weapon. So you'd hope it would be more powerful, but as we're going to discuss, it wasn't until they put the 90mm gun on it that it really became the vehicle it always should have been.
But it was still not as capable against heavier German armour as the Brits wanted. So like the Sherman Firefly, they decided to install their highly effective 17-pounder gun in the M10. It had the ability to penetrate the heavier armour at longer ranges than the 3-inch gun, but did have issues with accuracy that would take time to overcome. The 17-pounder was longer, but had a narrower barrel than the 3-inch gun, so the mantlet had to be modified to hold it in place.
Let's just remember the 17-pounder is also a 76.2mm weapon, but with a very long round. Yeah.
And we'll find out when we get to the Russians as to what it means when you call all the things that might have 76mm guns the same thing.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Yeah. It also included the muzzle brake and a counterweight on the end of the barrel to balance it out, because the breech, whichever way it was, they needed to balance out the end of the barrel because it wasn't as heavy as the 3-inch gun. So they needed to put more weight out the front to basically balance everything else out.
Just quickly on the 76.2 stuff, the so-called 77mm gun on the Comet, the high-velocity Vickers gun, was also 76.2, but they called it a 77 to stop the ammunition going to the wrong places.
Which is what we covered in the Commonwealth episode?
Yeah,
there we go. All right. The installation of the 17-pounder may also have simplified the logistics for the Brits, as they were already producing their own ammo for the 17-pounder, and they did not have to rely on the US deliveries for their ammo. The Brits sometimes also took advantage of the armour bosses and installed 17mm applique armour on the M10 and 20mm armoured roofs, sitting just above the turret to allow observation for special operations. They then would remove the applique armour afterwards. The Achilles were crewed by the Royal Artillery, not the Armoured Corps. The doctrine was that they were to deploy quickly to the position taken by the infantry and to be held against any blitzkrieg or German counterattack.
So they were very much treated as anti-tank guns that just happened to be self-propelled in British usage is what we're getting at.
Yeah. So the plan was the towed anti-tank guns would then move up to be dug in defensively to complete the position. So if the infantry took a position, the Achilles would move up, hold the area for the expected German counterattack. While they're holding that, the 17-pounder anti-tank guns or 6-pounder anti-tank guns would be moved up onto the position, dug in, which could take up to 24 hours for the 17-pounder towed variants.
17-pounder towed is a very big unit.
Yeah, and it's also you want to get them in defensively because there's no point having them out in the open where they can just get hit by artillery and then suddenly they're no use to you.
You've got to dig them in and cover them with shrubs. Yeah.
And so that could take up to 24 hours, and that's why you want your Achilles in there to provide the protection against the expected German counterattack because that's what they were really good at.
Well, I mean, the German counterattacking doctrine was so rigid that eventually the Allies just realised if we've taken some ground from them, they will counterattack. And it became a death trap for the Germans because they were expected. And it's never good to be expected on the battlefield.
No. In practice, the UK batteries were frequently separated in Normandy. M10s and Achilles being seconded to British tank brigades equipped with Churchill tanks with the bored-out 75mm gun. So they had 6-pounders, but they were then bored out to 75mm rounds.
Yeah, which gave them the high explosive. Yeah.
All right, Tasman's saying, I always get confused on this. I thought it was a 75mm. That's right, 70s. So the Sherman started out with a 75mm gun. The 76mm gun is the longer version, as seen on my T-shirt with the Sherman 76, as they're called. That's the 3-inch gun that was installed in the M10.
Yes, you're right. Sorry.
So, and which is the same, but
the 3-inch gun and the M10's a different 76.2. But anyway, let's keep going.
Yep. The notes. Okay, the M10 with twin diesel versus the M10 with A1 with the Ford V8 petrol. The only visual difference, well, one of the only visual differences being the fuel filler caps on the engine deck. One has 6, the other has 7. And it makes you ask the question, how many times did the wrong fuel get put in? And what do we want to say about that from Ozarma?
Well, because as we're going to talk about a lot, since we were last coming in your ears, we've been to Ozarma Fest in Cairns in
great time.
Far North Queensland. An amazing time was had by all the Totally Tank fans who made it. It was great to meet so many fans there. That was great. But one of the things that did happen was the Sherman Firefly on day 2 was filled up by an unfortunate employee with diesel. And had to be dragged by the recovery vehicle to a quiet spot to have all its fuel drained out. There are ways and means that you control making sure you put the right fuels in the right things, but when you're filling up with jerry cans, it can get complicated. Yeah. And
I still say for 6,000 of these things and you're just giving them to a bunch of GIs and saying, yep, fill this one up, and you've got 10 of them in front of you or 24 in front of you for a squadron of tanks, and half of them might be diesel and half of them might be petrol, and you're telling the guys, fill her up. How many times would that have happened?
Well, I mean, a diesel car has big writing on the fuel cap, diesel. But I mean,
in the dark, in the wet, in the rain, the snow, and you're not sure.
Yeah. And also the person tasked with filling it up is not necessarily the operator of that vehicle. He's just a dude who's been told put stuff in that thing.
And they may not have a car. They may not have driven. Just remember, we're coming out of the Great Depression, and not a lot of people had cars then. A lot more people in America had cars than the rest of the world, but still not a lot.
I do have a friend who had a Toyota Hilux that he had very heavily modified for hunting. It was his absolute pride and joy. And an amazing vehicle. And his wife, the one time in her life she decided, I'll do a nice thing for my husband and fill it up. And she filled it up with petrol. And his Hilux was never quite the same again.
All right. Oh,
Maddie's joined us. Good stuff.
Salute to you too, Maddie. All right. No hull or coax MG meant they did not have a close anti-infantry defensive weapon, as the turret-mounted 50 cal was too exposed to use, and they couldn't be firing the main gun and using the 50 cal because the recoil would hit the commander usually, who might have been operating the 50 cal. So you don't want to be using those both at the same time.
Yeah, and it just comes down to the difficult nature of operating these vehicles, but it's hard when it's been crippled to stop you using it inappropriately, but sometimes when you never plan to be ambushed by enemy infantry when you're operating a tank destroyer, but sometimes it happens.
I don't think it would have done very well in Fury.
I mean, I guess the point is retreat if you're in that position that you're not designed for.
Yep.
But yeah.
All right. The M10 initially lacked any provision for indirect fire. In May 1943, an azimuth indicator and gunner's quadrant were made available, but distribution of them was sporadic. The ability to elevate the gun to 30 degrees meant that it was used extensively for indirect fire support, firing HE rounds, especially in the mountains of Italy. Basically, if you're at the bottom of the river valley and you want to be able to hit the German and Italian forces dug in at the top, you need to be able to angle your gun up high enough to be able to get the HE in there.
Look, it's one of these things that's like you've got this open turret, and one of the advantages of the open turret is that you can balance the gun in ways that you can't in a more cramped, closed off turret. And I'm sure there were reasons, I have no doubt, because there weren't stupid people making this, but it seems disappointing that they weren't able to balance the turret, because that was a huge drawback, and also allow for bigger elevation, because, as they discovered when they got them in Italy, it's a great big 3-inch gun that can fire significant high explosive shells. Why wouldn't you use it as an artillery piece if you don't have any tanks to destroy that day?
Because it's tank destroyer. It's not artillery. It's
Yeah,
not a tank.
I know.
It's doctrine.
Yeah, and the US artillery branch has many times stuffed up the rest of the army by insisting on its special boy status. But yeah.
All right, Jonas Golden is asking what the elevation, the depression of the M10 was. So as I said, the elevation was 30 degrees. The depression there was a 10-degree depression. However, that was only based upon there was a chock or a stop in the gun design that only allowed it to go down to 10 degrees. If you took that chock out, it could actually depress down to 20 degrees. But the idea of that chock was that if the gun was fired at that lower depression, it would come up too high for when the breech recoiled. And it was designed for a roofed a turret with a roof on it, so it wouldn't be able to depress that far. But because it didn't have a roof on the turret, the crews could actually take out that stop, so it could actually depress much further than what the specifications were done for it. But you still wouldn't want to be standing behind it.
No, but yeah. I mean, it's back to Osama first, Rob. So I got to have a ride on the M10, which is the nuclear artillery piece. I think it's a 203mm gun.
208?
I think they said 3, but anyway, big gun, big vehicle, tremendous fun to ride. But one of the things that in the safety briefing when I got on board this thing was that do not touch the gun, do not have your hands anywhere near the gun. The gun and the vehicle will move in different ways at different times, and you do not want to be in contact with the gun because it weighs tons. When it starts moving. Yeah,
it's a big boy, and as John says, it does fire nuclear artillery or sarin gas.
Yeah,
that's another fun one, which the US still has. Anyway, the turret did have some little folding poles that you can then put up and stretch a canvas between them to make a little tent over the turret. So that's getting back to I think it was Alan's question, whether or not you could cover up the turret for weather. Yes, you could, and you make it had its own little tent poles for it.
Mehdi's asked, did it have a stabilizer? I'm going to say definitely not, because it was a hand cranked azimuth.
No, it did not. The weight of the gun meant that when it was moving, it was designed to be facing to the rear and clamped in with an external travel lock to stop any damage. This also,
as we were just mentioning, big guns move. Yeah.
This also meant that the driver and the co-driver could open their hull hatches, which were blocked by the turret if the turret was to the front. The gun was to the front. There was also an internal travel lock that the gunner could clamp into place on the breech to stop the gun moving around too much. So you could do both, or you could do one, or whatever. So it was basically stop the gun bouncing around if you're trying to race over open off-road terrain to get in a position to be able to flank the Panthers that are coming for you. All right. Outward sloping armour on the sides makes it much harder to climb onto than a Sherman, because you basically got to go on from the front or the rear. And
I mean, I see what that you're saying there, but I mean, it doesn't take much to create a step point on these vehicles.
But because it's sticking out 20 centimeters, you've got to climb over that
from further in. Oh, I see. You can't put your foot on the track and just go up. Okay. Right.
I can't just climb up it like a ladder. But no. Extra armor plates were placed under the driver and the co-driver to provide greater protection from mine blasts than what the M4 Sherman's versions had.
Oh, hey, I just want to say something. Folks might have noticed that there's no ads. Hopefully there's no ads in the live stream because we've demonetized the live stream because we're only getting about 10 cents of ad revenue.
Yeah, take that, YouTube.
And we value you guys being on the live stream more than we value that ad money. And obviously for people who can't watch the live stream, the patrons get it ad free and everyone else has to deal.
And I've never actually watched the live stream. I've been on it, but I haven't actually watched it, so I don't know.
Yeah. Callum's joined us. G'day, mate.
G'day, Callum. All right, conflicts. Let's get into the conflicts. All right.
Oh, yeah.
North Africa. The first successful action of the M10s was in North Africa around El Ghouta in March 1943. After the disaster of Kasserine Pass in February of 1943, the Axis forces...
Come on, Kasserine Pass was a draw. But yeah, I mean...
No, it wasn't.
I'd say Kasserine Pass was a debacle more than it was a disaster.
There was debacle.
It was a debacle, yeah.
Right.
I think we can agree on that.
All right. It was so much of a debacle that afterwards Rommel said, you know what? These US troops are hopeless. I'm just going to go over here and deal with the Brits.
Yeah. An opponent I can respect.
So in February, the Kasserine Pass was in late February 1943. The Axis forces had a low opinion of the capabilities of the green US forces. When the US forces advanced into El Ghouta, the German and Italian forces dug into the hills around the village, holding the pass, felt that a spoiling attack would be enough to clear them out. Get a bit of steel up them and chase them.
They don't like the cold steel up them, do they? No.
So on the 23rd of March, 1943, 44 motorised German units in half-tracks, supported by 40 tanks, overran the first line of US infantry and were manoeuvring to take out the supporting artillery when they ran into a minefield. Whilst they were
always a bad moment.
Whilst they were trying to reorganise from the minefield, the German forces were engaged by US artillery and anti-tank guns, including 31 newly arrived M10 tank destroyers. They destroyed 30 of the Panzers in the next hour, losing 7 M10s. This was forcing the Germans to realise further attacks were hopeless and to retreat and back to their dug-in positions. The Allies then went on the offensive and spent the next 10 days attacking, gaining ground, and then being counterattacked and forced back from their starting positions. Eventually, Monty and the General Montgomery and the Commonwealth forces advancing from the east forced the Axis to abandon their positions. And didn't Patton hate that?
All right, just very quickly, Hans Vorhand has just dropped us $50 in the chat.
Oh, mate.
So thank you very much. We really appreciate that. That's
wow.
That's a big chunk of change for us. So thank you. That's a ride for a 15-year-old at Osama Fest.
Or a slab of beer for us.
It's not a whole slab of beer anymore. But yeah. All right. Yes. Patton didn't like being rescued by Monty.
He was trying to force his troops to get up there, and he wanted his staff. I don't know if it was him or one of his other staff generals was telling this. I want as many staff officers dead as I want troops, because that way I know that they've been actually trying to plan things out properly rather than just sending them in to die. Anyway, there's a famous quote about that. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Anyway, Italy.
Cool.
Initially, when the M10s landed, they were initially facing German armour on the landing at Salerno, but they were then employed as mobile artillery fire support due to the terrain and dug-in enemy.
Sorry, just as a Navy nerd, just want to say, and what destroyed the Hermann Goering division at Salerno? HMS Warspite came in with its 15-inch guns and gave them a very hard time, and then got its bottom blown out by a guided bomb. But anyway, that's...
right. Yeah. All right. Spending most of their time firing HE rounds at the dug-in Germans in the mountains. All right, I found a very interesting page on the South African M10s. They call them a grouse. So
South Africans are stupid.
When they were
for the American audience in particular, white South Africans and Australians, they're basically the same people, only they had a more complicated situation with their Indigenous people, so they got to be evil and we got to pretend we were good. But we're very similar and we hate each other because of it.
They got to be evil and we got to pretend that there was nobody here.
Nobody here?
There was nobody here.
Terra Nullius, mate.
Till 1968, there was nobody here. It was bad.
Okay,
bad.
anyway, so what we're saying is actually that we love our South African friends, but we like to make fun of each other.
Yes,
really.
yes, they are part of the they're part of the gang that we like to make fun of, including the Kiwis, and sometimes the Brits, and sometimes the Canadians, but they get a little bit...
Look, Western Australia's been colonised by the white South Africans anyway, so that's fine. They can have it.
All right, so the South Africans had they deployed to Italy. They crewed 25 M10s provided to the Brits. They landed in Italy in late April 44. Through the summer, they advanced past Rome and up to Florence, engaging and killing a few German tanks, including Tigers. The Germans were mainly using them as aggressive defence to cover the road passes, as the terrain was not conducive to tank combat. The South African M10s were mainly used to support infantry as they moved through the villages, taking out machine gun nests or light artillery.
So absolutely not what it was designed to do, and a very poor use of it. But if it's the vehicle you've got, then that's what goes in there.
As the snow settled into the mountains, the M10s were used as artillery, but did not receive the azimuth indicators until December of late December. So, but
December of 1944 is what you technically called a bit late, but yeah.
Yeah, and it was very snowy. Yeah. I mean, as Ardennes, it was a case of one of the snowiest, bloody coldest winters ever at the time. But the combat was very static until the spring, when they were used to advance through the north of Italy, from Bologna to Venice, then Milan. At the war's end, the South Africans were looking forward to shipping their remaining 24 M10s back to Durban to be basically take them home and say, look what we did. But had to work through the British with approval from the Americans as to what was getting shipped home.
Well, the Lend-Lease ownership got extremely complicated, which was why the British Pacific Fleet at the end of World War II was literally pushing planes off the side, because if they retained the planes, then they had to pay for them. But if they were lost as war losses, then they weren't a liability. The fact that they'd taken these vehicles and then given them to South Africans, and the South Africans were like, oh, we're just going to take them home. And they're like, no.
And with the manifest set for shipping, the 24 M10s were then removed from the list, and the ships sailed without them. So they didn't get to take home their M10s. They were a bit sad about that.
Well, they bought a bunch of Centurions that they're still using. So probably a better deal, really.
All right, France. The M10s were not as well liked in the breakout from Normandy due to the vulnerability of the open-top turret and the close engagements, and less armour than the Shermans. And once they started coming up against Panthers, they had to get closer to penetrate their armour.
It was just starting to sound like a really bad idea, but yeah.
This improved over time with the introduction of the HVAP ammo. So
it's high-velocity armour-piercing ammo, which sort of a precursor to... discarding Sabo, but yeah.
In November 1944, meaning that they could penetrate the Panther's armour from 1,000 metres, 1,000 yards, sorry, rather than one's Imperial, which I always use the stuff for the Americans for being Imperial, rather than the 200 yards of the old armour-piercing ammo.
Let's quickly go back. So with the HVAP, they could penetrate at 1,000 versus 200. 200 is too close. 1,000 is a good distance.
The Achilles, with their 17-pounder guns, had the advantage of being able to penetrate a Panther from 1,250 metres from the beginning. So,
Tasman's just pointed out in the chat that HVAP was rare ammo. I believe it had to have a tungsten core to work.
You had to pay gold for that one.
Yeah, and
so six gold a shot. That's a World of Tanks.
That's a World of Tanks joke. Okay. But the point is, tungsten was in high demand and quite rare, and so tanks had very small rations of them. But when mostly you're fighting half-tracks and soft-skin vehicles, and you're only going to encounter a real tank a couple of times in a day, only having a few rounds of the good stuff in the ready rack, it's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah.
All right, the Achilles. On D-Day, 124 Achilles landed in Normandy as part of the Commonwealth Forces, crewed by the Royal Artillery and the Royal Canadian Artillery. On D+1, the Canadians had taken the village of Buron, northwest of Cayenne, like the pepper, because that's how Australians say it.
Cane?
No, it's Caen. Caen. But
that's a very British pronunciation. I don't think the French call it that. But anyway.
As I say, as an Australian, I'm going to call it Cayenne because that's how it's written.
Well, the pepper. No, that's with a Y. Okay.
I know.
Yeah. All right.
That's the joke.
Yeah. Okay.
The 12th SS Panzer Regiment counterattacked with 50 tanks, including Tigers and Panthers. The M10s and Shermans of the Canadians could not hold out, and they were pushed back from the village with large losses. It was pretty horrific fighting, and number of war crimes and atrocities happened to the poor Canadians. They got captured there.
Yeah, they probably deserved it. Sorry.
Who are you? What have you done with John? All right, a month later, in July,
I'm joking. I love Canada. I love Canadians. I'm just joking.
Right. A month
we've
later,
been mean to South Africans, so we had to, go there.
balance that by being mean to everybody else. All right, a month later in July, as part of Operation Charnwood, to take Cayenne, the Canadians would once again take the village of Buron, and the Achilles of the 245th Battery of the 62nd Anti-Tank Regiment were swiftly sent forward to perform their anti-tank role against expected German counterattack. When the 12th SS Panzer Regiment counterattacked this time, they lost 13 tanks to the Allies for the loss of 4 Achilles. Right, M10s. Whilst the Canadians were heading to Buron with their Achilles, 60 kilometres to the west, the US forces were heading inland to Saint Lô and the village of Le Desert, on 10th of July 1944. With their M10s. 2 regiments of the US 9th Infantry Division advancing south had left a mile-wide gap between them, and the Panzer Lehr Division with 100 tanks and Stugs down from 232 because of attrition and basically fighting the Brits over near Cayenne and air attacks and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, Panzer Lehr is one of the more famous divisions of the war.
And so they were down to 100 tanks and Stugs, and they were counterattacking and trying to exploit the gap between these 2 regiments. Probing during the night, they came across a crossroads guarded by 4 M10s of the 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion, forcing them to go on another road when they encountered another 4 M10s guarding the next crossroads.
This does sound like the Tank Destroyer branch fulfilling its
it does, doesn't it? It sounds
role.
like it's doing its role, saying, yep, we've taken ground, we want something there that can deal with unexpected armoured counterattack.
Mm-hmm.
There was a contact between the forces, firing at each other's muzzle flashes, forcing the German column to move back. Come daylight, the Panzers found their position was more exposed than they realised, and they then lost 3 Panthers to airstrikes before they could get back into better cover. Continuing their counterattack during the day, the German Panthers again ran into M10s guarding across crossroads. Heavy fighting continued into the afternoon with both sides sending in reinforcements, M10s and Panthers. With the weight of numbers against them, the Panzer Lehr Division had to withdraw, losing another 2 Panthers stuck in a roadside ditch. Overall, the Panzer Lehr Division lost 30 tanks and 700 troops. Didn't have any numbers on what the US losses were in that engagement. The liberation of Paris. 4 M10s of the Free French forces under General Leclerc were moving to the centre of Paris on 24th of August 1944, coming from the northwest past the Arc de Triomphe, whilst a company of Sherman M4s were advancing from the southeast past the Louvre. Meanwhile, there were 3 German Panther tanks were dominating the city centre, 1 at the Place de la Concorde and 2 in the Tuileries Garden. So not very far from each other.
I mean, these are all places I've been, and it's wild to think of tank fighting in the middle of it.
That's why I've thrown all these names in there, because if you go to Paris, you've been to at least 2 of these 3 or 4 places.
And
right?
it's worth noting that the German officers defending Paris had quite strict orders from the Fuhrer that they were supposed to burn the place to the ground.
Yep.
And they basically looked at what they were facing.
Well, the general said,
and they looked around Paris and they said, we are going to be remembered for 1,000 years if we burn Paris down, and it's not going to help us win the war. And they just couldn't bring themselves to do it.
So there was 1 at the Place de la Concorde and 2 in the Tuileries Garden. The Panther at the Place de la Concorde. This is where the guillotines were set up during the French Revolution. Just remember, boys and girls, the last time the guillotine was used in 1977 in our lifetimes. Think of that as a fun little fact.
Yeah.
All right, the one at the Place de la Concorde spots the M10 down the Champs-Élysées at the Arc de Triomphe and fires 3 times, missing and hitting the Arc. The commander of the M10 Sirocco, is the name of the tank, orders the gunner to set their range to 1,500 metres. But the gunner, being a Parisian, knows the distance was 1,800 metres from the Arc de Triomphe to Place de la Concorde and set his shot accordingly. Firing twice, the M10 takes out the Panther's tracks and mobilising it. Shermans from the southeast enter into the Place de la Concorde and see the immobilized Panther. After their rounds bounce off it, the commander orders a white phos shell to be fired and then ram the Panther.
That's a ballsy move.
He then,
Drive me closer, I would have hit them with my sword.
he then climbs out of his Sherman, climbs onto the Panther, and is firing his service pistol into the inside of the turret. The Panther crew had actually already scarpered by this stage, but he was going to make damn sure he killed these bastards. He then got shut up by other guns from around the place because he was climbing all over the outside of a Panther and outside of his nicely protected Sherman. But anyway, it was very brave of him, but a little bit stupid. He was caught up in the moment. Parisian French passion.
It sounds like red mist to me, but yeah.
All right. The more Shermans advancing from the southeast past the Louvre engaged the Panthers in the Tuileries Gardens, destroying both, but not before losing 4 of their own. The Germans surrendered the city the next day. Some fun stuff about who was and was not allowed to march in the victory parade.
It's always a tangled web.
The next day. All right. Soviet service on the Eastern Front. All right, this one's. All right. With special thanks to the Tank Archives for such detailed information, and it's well worth a read to see what the Soviets went through to get their M10s into service. All right, strap in, boys and girls.
Here we go.
I think we're going to finish this beer tube, and we're going to be onto the...
We might do the beer review early.
Beer review early because
we got a halftime interview that is some real superstars of the tank world. Nick and Phil, the Tank Twins from Combat Dealers. But that's only 10 minutes, so it'll be quite a short. And then we've got a lot to talk about in the second half. But Rob, continue. Tell us about the Soviets' use of the M10s.
The Soviets first learned of the M10s in March 43 via their US attaché, and they underlined that the 76mm gun in the GMC M10 was an equal of that of the German 88mm anti-aircraft gun, and as at present the Soviet tank artillery could not penetrate their captured Tiger, a means of fighting Tigers was urgently needed. So they underlined that, said, we want some of these. They liked that it was on the same chassis as the M4A2, as they knew how that worked. The Soviets ordered 2 M10s for testing, with the idea of ordering 50 more if it all went well in June 1943. The trial M10s arrived quickly in Baku in August 43. One was sent for mobility testing. The other
Baku means it had come up from Iran overland.
Yeah, coming from the south.
That was a tough journey, but yeah.
One was sent for mobility testing, and the other was sent for gunnery trials. Only one problem: they hadn't sent any ammo for the 3-inch gun. So
that's a bit of a problem. It was a weird gun, as we've had some conversations going on in the chat, because Tasman has come around to what we were saying, I think, before he joined the show, to be fair, in that it was quite a orphan weapon that happened to share the same caliber as so many Allied weapons of 76.2mm at that time. Yeah.
Many of the bolt mounts were for mounting extra armour on. He's got the question in the chat. We've discussed that one.
Medi's just asked what were the front bolt mounts for.
That's what I'm saying, extra armour.
Oh, right, okay.
That was the armour bosses.
Yes, that's what I thought we were saying. Yes.
Right, it went through, the one for mobility trials went through mobility trials in late September 43 and performed as well as the Shermans. They had they had in their 1,000-kilometre march, but a bit faster as designed, but couldn't go up a slope more than 22 degrees.
22 degrees is a pretty steep slope, but yeah, I mean,
still
a track vehicle should be able to go in first gear and rumble up anything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The gunnery trials couldn't start until January 44 when the 3-inch ammo arrived, but it was only the anti-tank rounds, no HE was sent. It was also missing parts, toolkits and documentation. Actual firing did not start until mid-March 44.
I mean, by mid-March 1944, the Soviets had much better vehicles than this as well. I mean, they didn't mind having more vehicles, but, you know, with orphan supply chains and...
If they'd gotten all these things in August 43, they could have really... Because 43 was when they really needed the capabilities.
Yeah, and also on the Russian steppes, a great big gun with great visibility that can be sitting behind some cover and some shrubs... you know, it could have been a thing, but it was just, you know, a little bit late and a little bit unsupported.
But could have been in there and doing it from mid 43 type.
Now, in the chat, people are laughing about the episode we drank gin and how hilariously drunk we got. Thank you, folks. We appreciate that.
That was the only time I've ever drunk gin. I've never... All right. It was found that in March 44, when they were doing the gunnery testing, it was found that the US anti-tank rounds could penetrate up to 120 millimeters of armor at 500 meters, whereas the Soviet-made ammunition could only achieve 100 millimeters of penetration. They didn't like the lack of a roof, not only for the vulnerability and weather, but also there were no hatches to use as cover when evacuating the turret under enemy fire. So with the T-34...
That's an interesting one. Yeah, the 3476 has a lot of cover. The Mickey Mouse ear versions had less, but I was...
The hatch is still open to the front, you could climb out behind them.
With some cover on you,
They also had issues with the commander only having a vertical traverse and the gunners traversing flywheels being too close together so that you couldn't use both effectively at the same time. So
it's a sniper, not a brawler.
But anyway, for the loader, they did not like that there was only 6 ready rounds and the rest had to be retrieved from the hull sponsons.
Again, sniper, but
overall, the M10 passed the tests, but there were complaints. This did not stop them ordering the follow-up 50 M10s even before the tests were completed, and they arrived in January 1944. And that's where the real fun begins.
Oh, the real fun. I'm looking forward to that.
Many of the 50 vehicles arrived without parts, toolkits, or 50 cals. Two were broken on arrival.
The Soviets had no shortage of good 50 caliber weapons, but obviously not the immortal mud use, but they had a lot of good ones. But yeah.
When they arrived at the crew training centre, there were no instructors or documentation for the M10s, as the only Soviets who had any familiarity with the M10s were the testers themselves, and there was still no ammunition for them. So the British idea of using the 17-pounder because they had their own ammo supply doesn't look so silly now, does it?
No, it made a lot of sense, really. But yeah, also, as we keep saying, this 3-inch / 76.2 millimeter gun was quite unusual and didn't fit into other supply chains. But it was the weapon they had that they could get in the vehicle at the time.
Well, later on, the later war supply chains included a lot more of them. It was only because this was the mid-war period where they weren't quite. It wasn't quite the gun that was used everywhere.
But by late war, the M36 Jackson with the 90 millimeter gun was a far superior platform as well. So another set of ammo.
The first 875 armour-piercing rounds arrived in January 1944 with no HE, with another 5,000 shells coming in March 44, which included HE. So basically, they had enough. After the firing, they had 2 loads for each tank. With each vehicle was allocated 27 armour-piercing and 27 HE. So they had slightly less than 2 loads for the 50 tanks they were going to then deploy.
It's worth remembering the Soviets did not have American tank destroyer doctrine. So they were just like, this is a vehicle, how do we make it fit in what our doctrine is? Now, I just want to quickly say hello to Grumble Mark, who's joined us from Japan. First time commenter. Good to see you again.
Thanks for joining us.
And Brandon has noted that we're totally tank, not totally saver. You got it.
Eventually, the crews were trained and the M10s were deployed into service with the 21 M10s in 2 self-propelled artillery regiments each, so 42 all up, entering combat in July 44. The next issue is one of identification. The Soviets listed them as an Su-76, which was already in use by the Soviet self-propelled gun Su-76. So determining determining if a Su-76 in a combat report was from a self-propelled artillery regiment was an M10 or a Soviet vehicle, an Su-76, is very difficult. So
and the Su-76 is one of the most produced combat vehicles in history. There were a lot of them. In the second half, we'll have video of one running around at Ozhammerfest.
So again, when I've got all this from the Tank Archive. So when Peter's looking at these things and saying, okay, there's a Peter Samsonoff from the Tank Archive, so obviously is the one reading these things in Russian, and looking at Su-76 and saying, well, is it an
M10 or an actual Su-76?
So thank you, Peter, for all your work. So
we'll have to get you back on the show, Peter. But yes, Crafty Potatoes also joined us on the stream. So
welcome.
Hello, welcome all these new folks. It's fantastic. Not that we don't love the old folks. We totally appreciate
love is all.
the old lags. Yeah, go on.
All right, on July 30th, 1944, advancing across Poland, they came under attack by the Luftwaffe, losing several Su-85s on their march. The regiment, the M10s, in contrast, did not suffer any losses.
I mean, that's lucky because bombing is death to these open-topped turrets.
And they then managed to shoot down a Junkers 88 with their 50 cals.
That was very lucky.
Yeah, but they made it. These are some of the combat reports we did get.
That Stuka must have gotten very up close and personal to get hit by a 50 cal, a fatal hit with a 50 cal.
Yeah. Later in August 44, with 17 guns, the 1239th Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment fought in the Warsaw area, where from 1st to the 5th of August 1944, they successfully repelled attacks of the German tank units, with the 4th Battery alone knocking out 3 German tanks, including 2 Panthers and 2 armoured cars. There were no further requests for M10 tank destroyers, as the Sherman 76 came out in the summer of 44, having the same gun and enclosing the turret. 10.
When we say the same gun, same caliber gun.
Yeah.
As we've discussed, slightly different gun, but same caliber.
Yep.
Yeah.
10 was still listed as being in service at the end of the Great Patriotic War. So, right, we go back to
Belgium.
After the Battle of Aachen in October 44 and the Ardennes, as in the Battle of the Bulge in December 44, the M10s were being replaced by M18 Hellcats and M36 Jacksons.
So once again, to reiterate, the Jackson is an M10, but with a bigger 90mm gun with a muzzle brake, and we've got a lot of.
It'll get its own episode one day, because I say, well, the M10 was a World War II tank, the destroyer. The M36 was a
went to Korea, but
it had a longer life. But the M10s were still in use. However, the Allies' air superiority and German defensive use of the remaining armour meant there was less need for tank destroyers.
So we've got a quick and really interesting question in the chat here. Crafty Potato is asking, he's a volunteer at a tank museum in Poland, and they have a much crippled M10 sitting in the back. Could it have got there during the war or after? As we've just discussed, it could. I can't speak to it. Obviously, I haven't seen the serial numbers.
We'll come over and find out.
But it could well have been a Soviet M10 that came in the advance into Poland. But without looking at it, we don't know. Yep.
Who knows? Well, we can do some research. Or the Gestalt mind of Totally Tanked can do some research and let us know next time.
Also, Crafty Potato, if you can find some serial numbers, that would be extremely interesting to a lot of people. We might get Peter Samsonov on that. But yeah. All right.
Where were we? There was less need for tank destroyers going to Germany, as it was usually the Shermans running into dug-in and camouflage tanks. Basically, because the Shermans were going forward first and foremost, they were the ones running into any defensive German positions. But you can find a YouTube footage of the 4th Cavalry Recon Squadron, reinforced, with M10s and Greyhounds taking the town of Neunhausen-Grevenbroich in Germany in March 1945. One image shows them passing a field full of downed Allied planes, which was an aluminium salvage and refining factory called Erftwerk, which is still in operation today. Probably not from B-29s, though.
I think this is an appropriate moment to note that the only reason the Germans could keep building planes into 1945 was because of the Allies were gifting them aluminium out of the sky, and the tons of aluminium of Bomber Command and the US 8th Air Force that came plummeting to the ground over Germany.
It was a huge. The photo of this was a huge field just filled with aircraft bodies.
Yeah.
And as I say, they were just harvesting the aluminium, because aluminium, boys and girls, is highly recyclable. So recycle those cans.
Yeah. Highly recyclable, but also very expensive to get out of bauxite because it's made of electricity. But once you've got it, keep reusing it.
Yep. All right. Pacific. The M10s actually made it to the Pacific.
There we go.
The Philippines actually saw the largest deployment of M10s in World War II, with 5 full tank destroyer battalions.
Sorry, Mehdi's asking a question about the M10 that we've got in the slideshow, and that was also it confused a lot of people. It's the one at Aberdeen. Was at Aberdeen. I think it's moved since. It did have a bore evacuator, and it was an unusual regunning, but it is an M10. So there you go. Yeah.
All right. The Philippines, the M10s in Philippines had 5 full tank destroyer battalions deployed. 2 of which.
What enemy armor did they think they were going to encounter?
They produced 6,000 of them. There was.
I'm more just saying, tank destroyer doctrine, tank destroyer branch didn't want to get left out of the Pacific, had to be involved, but there were no huge Japanese armored thrusts eventuating. Anyway, and then it's like, well, can we have a roof on this thing? Yeah. Anyway, continue, please, Rob.
2 of those tank destroyer battalions later had their M10s swapped out for M18 Hellcats. In October 44, the US Army landed on the eastern side of the island of Leyte Gulf, in the Philippines. The Japanese, not realizing how large the US force was, attempted to bring in reinforcements at a place called Ormoc Bay on the western side of the island. To prevent these reinforcements, the US landed troops near Ormoc Bay on the 7th of December 44. The troops deployed were the 77th Infantry Division, known as the Old Bastards, which was an experimental division that was made up to troops 30 to 50 years old, rather than the 18 to 26-year-olds of most infantry divisions.
So that sounds like a fun group.
It was.
It would be good to go to the pub with that lot.
So advancing, they were very highly decorated, I think. So advancing north to Ormoc Bay, the US forces took control of the area along with their attached M10 tank destroyers. On the night of the 11th of December 44, several enemy vessels were observed moving into the bay with the intention to land and deploy troops. The Old Bastards, with the M10s and other supporting elements, opened fire when the ships were 50 yards from shore, and the landing was repulsed, and the Japanese number 101 class ship, which is the equivalent of a landing ship tank, was sunk, the kill being attributed to the M10s. Another LST was severely damaged but managed to return to sea, where it was hunted down by aircraft once the sun came up. The events of the Battle of Ormoc Bay remain the only recorded time an armoured vehicle has effectively scored a kill on a naval vessel.
And I just quickly want to note Seth Harp, who's written a very interesting book about US Special Forces, and it's going to be in and I think an Amazon show coming up. But he wrote an article about going to Trump's big US Army parade, the one that's been kind of dwarfed by the Chinese. And one of the things he noted was that there was on the mall in Washington, there was an obstacle course race between a bunch of teams from the US Army,
right?
And the Sergeant Major of the Army entered a team of his 50-year-old buddies, and they finished 9th in the middle of the field, and turned around and said, "You should all be ashamed of yourselves."
And that's the confidence that comes from being middle-aged. Saying, I don't give a stuff that I'm here. It's just, I'm better than all you young folks who don't even bother trying.
I'm better than a bunch of you young folks.
Anyway.
Yes.
All right, Korean War. I won't get too much detail into it. The Canadian forces took their M10 Achilles to the Korea, and they were later replaced by Comets. Colorado Rockies. We all remember Patrick Swayze led their Wolverines.
Wolverines!
Avenge me, boys!
Avenge me!
In their defeat of the communist forces, including invading America during Red Dawn in 1984.
Now, we just want to quickly note that the 1984 Red Dawn is the only one to watch, and the remake involving the South Koreans. No.
Chris Hemsworth, no, just Patrick Swayze with
look,
Charlie.
I like Chris Hemsworth. I just no.
It's just, I mean, Jennifer Jason Leigh and Lee Thompson.
Yeah.
I mean, they're.
It was a stupid movie.
See Thomas Howell.
It was a stupid movie, but it was fun.
It was for its time.
And at least it had a vaguely realistic scenario of Cubans. Anyway,
Nicaraguans.
It wasn't completely insane. It was just mostly insane.
It was all insane.
Yeah,
but it was fun. It was fun, right? It was a movie of its time as well, right? And look, I was running around the backwoods of.
The beer's gone, Rob. We're out of beer.
Don't.
This is totally tainted. We're out of beer.
Mate, I am nothing if not a logistician.
All right.
We will have more beer.
What have we got? Oh, okay. This is going to require me getting out my...
Bottle opener.
Yep. Yes. Okay, so...
No, the bottle opener that he didn't get taken off him at the airport in Cairns, even though they thought about it. And I did say, make sure we've got one for when we need to do beer.
So, TSA approved bottle opener. Yes, beer review. Thank you, Hans.
Yep. We'll get on to that. Operators, we'll just go quickly through these ones. World War II, obviously. US.
Jesus, you bought us some leg opener here, Rob. This is what you buy young women. It's not what men drink, but okay. All right, let's...
All right. The Brits, who gave it to the Canadians, the South Africans, the Kiwis, New Zealanders, the South Africans, and the Polish. They all had various versions of the M10s and the Achilles. The Free French also had theirs. The Soviets got some, and post-war, Israel picked up a few from places. Egypt picked up a few from the Brits. Denmark, Netherlands got a few from Canada. South Africa managed to get somehow.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, they were the ones operating during the
World War II.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I didn't take them out of the Philippines. I'm assuming again that was part of World War II. Italy and South Africa got them after the war. All right, models. The M10 with the twin diesel engines, the M10A1 with the Ford V8 petrol engine. Then there were the different counterweight models. First, there was just the extra track link, and the objects moved to the rear of the turret. Then the dedicated weighted plates. Then the 3,700-pound heavy counterweight, and finally the 2,700-pound duckbill counterweight. The Brits, wanting to be perfectly imprecise, decided to call their M10s. They received the Achilles. Even those without the 17-pounder installed were called the Achilles.
Well, from the point of view of we need parts for the Achilles, aside from the operation of the gun, it was all the same parts. So I can see that.
Yeah. And they also had the Achilles Mark 1 for the M10 and the Achilles Mark 2 for the M10A1. And if it had the 17-pounder installed, they added the letter C. So I can't remember why they had letter C, because I guess the other arches and so forth had letter C. So the A7, a 17-pounder Achilles M10 would be an Achilles Mark 1C, and the M10A1 with the 17-pounder would be the Achilles Mark 2C.
And this seems like a weird hill to die on, but let's remember there were 1,000 of these things, so they were a significant armoured vehicle in their own right.
All right. Variants. The M35 turretless version was used as a prime mover gun tractor. That was developed at the end of produced at the end of 43.
But basically, it's an M4 gun tractor, really, at that point. But yeah.
No, it was less armour. But now, the fun one.
The Sonic.
The M10
It's
Sonic.
on the screen right now. We've managed it. Serendipity.
The M10 Sonic.
Yeah.
The 31st, 33rd Signal Company, so 3133 Signal Service Company, was activated in June 21st, 1944, and was issued with 24 M10 tank destroyers with huge speakers placed inside. These speakers would fold out of the open-top turret and play sounds of massed armoured vehicles moving around. The speakers were nicknamed Slugs, and to make room for their electronics of these speakers, the M10s had their guns replaced with fake wooden barrels. They were deployed effectively in Italy on 4th of April 1945 as part of Operation Craftsman, the Allied assault on the Gothic Line, Germany's last line of defence in Italy. Joining them was a platoon from the 101st Royal Engineers, who were equipped with 35 dummy rubber tanks. During the night, the 24 M10 Sonics drove into the Serchio Valley, playing the sounds of an armoured force build up ready for an attack, luring the Germans into opening up with their artillery to reveal the location of their guns and keep the German forces concentrated in the wrong area, ready for an attack. According to a report done after the war, the deception was considered successful in as much as 24 of the 35 dummy tanks were knocked out by enemy fire.
Sucks to be the crew of those.
Well, no, they're just,
Yeah, but when your job is to draw fire, that's it. You know.
well, the thing is, they're rubber tanks. Okay, so you put them out there and then you walk away. You just put them out there saying, "Yeah, shoot these ones." All right. A later report from the German commander admitted that the deception worked and that he delayed moving reserves from the Serchio Valley to the coastal area for 2 days. As Operation Craftsman continued, the M10 Sonics were deployed again in 3 platoons on the 14th of April 1945 near Bologna, where they simulated armoured reinforcements on the right flank of the American lines as they drove up 3 separate river valleys.
Now, Rob, someone's joined the chat.
Greetings from Brisbane. My Armourfest brothers. Warwick.
Warwick, there you go.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
We spent a lot of time drinking beers with Woz in Cairns, and he's a top dude. Thank you very much for joining me.
I'll just share the story about so we got off a plane with Warwick. This was a guy standing around in the line to catch an Uber.
He had a big beard and he had a T-shirt with a tank on it.
So we thought, that's one of our group. But later on that night, we were at a pub, the Cock and Bull, and I was at the bar, and there was another guy beside me, and who had very similar features, a long beard, and
there are quite a few dudes in Cairns with bald heads and big beards.
I asked him, "Were you the guy on the plane with us?" And he said, "No, mate, it wasn't me." But the next day at the Oz Armourfest, I then saw a guy with a long beard. It looked very much like the guy who'd been on the plane with us. And we're walking along, and I said, "Were you on the plane with us?" He said, "Yeah, I recognise you." And I said, "Well, we're going to the pub." And away Warwick came with us, and he joined the crew.
Yes.
So, making friends along the way.
Yes.
All right. The Ersatz M10s.
Ersatz M10s. Yep.
All right. Planning for the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 was that English-speaking German troops would be disguised as US soldiers, and Panthers were disguised as M10 tank destroyers as part of Operation Grief.
And you actually have to be quite careful when you're Googling for images of M10s, because the Panthers that were disguised as M10s do pop up without a lot of explanation. But yeah.
The plan devised by the Little Corporal himself, this force would infiltrate through the Allied lines to secure a bridge over the River Meuse and then cause confusion and disruption to any Allied counterattack by changing road signs, giving false orders and removing minefield warnings and putting up dummy minefield warnings. They wanted...
That's such a smart thing to do, because all you need to do is put a little sign up saying minefield ahead in English, and it doesn't even need to be in the right font, and it doesn't need to have the right symbols. It just needs to look vaguely right, and people are still going to freak out. It's a bit like the way the Hungarians, when the Soviets were invading, just put dinner plates spray painted green on the road, and the Russians were like, "Oh, it's a mine. Better get the sappers up and halt the advance."
Yep. Nothing stops an advance like a minefield. All right, they wanted English speakers, uniforms, weapons, and vehicles, including captured tanks, to fit out 3 battalions. The most they got was a mix of 150 commandos and soldiers who could speak English, who went on to a very quick commando and demolition course. The other 2,500 soldiers would only be used as infantry. In the end, 5 Panthers were disguised as M10s with US markings, sheet metal applied to the hull front and the turret to give it a semblance of the correct shape. They removed the commander's cupola, but they still had enclosed turrets. They had a pop-out metal cover over the hull MG and just kept the coax MG on the turret.
I want to quickly chime in here, Rob, because in the world of doing tank identification, for me at least, the first thing I look at is the number of road wheels. And a Panther and a...
The next line is, nothing was done to disguise the interleaved road wheels, which is, again, big thing. So interleaved road wheels, 36 of them, versus 8 bogies on a side. Yeah.
Whereas a Cromwell, for example... with its big road wheels, I think you can make a Panther look like a Cromwell more easily or more credibly. But anyway, yeah.
Only the commandos were sent through the Allied lines, causing some havoc, but with the actual Battle of the Bulge running 2 days behind schedule on their advance, the commando, Otto Skorzeny, the self-styled most dangerous man in Europe, who had led the Operation Panzerfaust to free Mussolini, requested that his troops and tanks be allowed to operate as normal infantry, as there was no way they would be able to carry out their covert mission.
Now let's remember Otto Skorzeny, with all the horrible things he did for the Nazis, and lots of parachuting and weird scars, and ended up
child kidnapping.
And child kidnapping, ended up his career working for Israel, which is a bit of a precursor to the way the Israelis have gone. But anyway, yeah.
Permission he was then granted permission, and the Panthers went into battle in support of the infantry. So, but we all know how the Battle of the Bulge ended up. It did not go well for them.
Well, yeah, I mean, they didn't achieve their objectives, but I would argue their objectives were a little optimistic.
Just a little. Yeah. Just a little. All right. The M10 self-propelled howitzer. Demilitarized M10s were transferred to the Republic of China. Slash Taiwan.
So ROC was Taiwan, but yeah.
Yeah, in 1949. So this is really, it's not a case of, we're sending it to mainland China. It was a case of 1949, you're sending it to Taiwan. And they were then rearmed with modified ex-imperial Japanese Army 105mm infantry howitzers.
Which is a much bigger gun than, even the Jackson was a 90mm. So but yeah, I mean, howitzers are indirect fire, but yeah.
They had one prototype and 16 follow-on vehicles were made. Israeli M10s. Israel converted all sorts of tanks using 75mm guns received from France, including a number of M10s that were renamed as M50 Achilles tank destroyers. There you go. And they had other tanks that they just threw in a 75mm French gun because that's who was selling them guns at that stage.
Yep.
All right, legacy. Since doing my homework on the M10s and the Achilles, I'm getting a lot of ads from Tracks and Trade trying to sell me an Achilles.
Oh, good.
And I'm very tempted to give them a call. They're in the Netherlands, if anyone is interested.
I don't think we can't afford the shipping on the tank from the Netherlands.
I do feel like it's just coming up in all my YouTube ads nowadays. It's a case of Trade and Tracks. Do you want to buy an Achilles?
Yeah, because doing the show, I get a lot of ads for microphones and cameras. But yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
All right. Legacy of the tank. All right. The German tactic of concentrating tanks to rapidly penetrate enemy defensive lines led the US Army's request for a new weapon dedicated to counter such offensives. The US Army moved to the idea of using aggressive mobile anti-tank units, employing stealthy reconnaissance and destroying the enemy armoured elements by gunfire from carefully chosen positions, and preferably less expensive than a tank.
Yeah, it didn't do that, did it? Because it was just a tank with a dud turret. But anyway, go on.
This was the driving force of the M10 tank destroyer, the most produced US tank destroyer of the war. Like with many things, it wasn't the tank destroyer they wanted. They wanted to build one from the drawing board up, but it was the tank...
Which was the M18 Hellcat, which was a much better vehicle, but yeah.
But it was the tank destroyer they could get into production as quickly as possible, and it was good enough and common enough that it did not create an undue burden on the supply system. It was a good vehicle for its role and complemented the Sherman in its role. And lastly, but not to be forgotten,
Girls and Panzer!
All right. BC Freedom Academy operate a mix of tanks, French, US, British, German, i.e. anything the Free French operated, including Panthers, and also an M10 Wolverine, which is never used in school battles due to its open topped. So there you go.
Oh, the Girls and Panzer rules. I just want to quickly note, Girls and Panzer is having quite a fight at the moment. The BBC's done a documentary on the perfidious, hypersexualized world of anime. And they featured...
My goodness.
They featured Girls and Panzer, which is quite tame in these things.
There's very little fan service in that one.
Yeah, and to add insult to injury, one of the key creators of Girls and Panzer gave a 3-hour interview to the BBC for this special, and the BBC then used none of that 3 hours in the special. So Girls and Panzer has a real hate on for the BBC right now, and it does sound like the BBC's been a little inflammatory there. Tasman's back. Well done. Okay, so we're going to quickly refer to the poll, which is right now at 87% the right tank at the right time. Rob, have you drunk enough of that beer to give it a review?
I can.
Okay, or take a big swig. Let's get that sorted out. So coming up in the halftime interview, Nick and Phil, the tank twins from Bruce Compton's Combat Dealer Show, and they are
and all their own stuff.
They work for the wealthiest tank collectors in the world because they are the guys who can
the Wheatcroft collection.
let's not talk about Wheatcroft too much, but they can get the vehicles running, and then they can make the pioneering tools and the ammunition boxes, and they
brought out for Oz Armour Fest specifically for the Panther that they have running, and because they are really good with Panthers.
But also so these guys are the absolute royalty, and they were so generous in offering their time, and it was quite funny because a bunch of people at the festival were like, you should go talk to these guys.
Everybody kept telling us we should go talk to them.
Go talk to them. And more to the point, we were told they want to talk to people. So and well, when we said, hey guys, can we get you for a quick interview? They were extremely generous with their time, and so they're really great people, and they know more about tanks than absolutely everyone. But okay, so Rob, let's quickly talk about, you have bought Miller Chill Lime. So it's an ice-filtered beer with cordial.
American. It's
cordial
American.
added. It is American. That is something. So we have a ice-filtered lime cordial flavored beer. And what does it taste like? It tastes like
lime cordial.
Tastes like Miller Lite with lime added. And you know what? It's delightful.
330ml bottle.
If I was ordering an alcoholic soft drink, yeah, it's fine. I mean, you get Radlers, and it's in that space.
4% alcohol.
So it's not Miller Lite. That's a strong beer for Miller. But
it's Miller Lime Lager, Chill Lager.
Yeah.
So look, clear bottle. So drink it quick, I guess.
Yeah, don't leave it in the sun.
Yeah.
Definitely not. But yes,
it's got an eagle right on the bottle.
It's Miller. Yeah. I do. I am.
If you look on the inside of the bottle, it's got some sort of.
It looks like a South American.
You reckon condor?
Yeah, a bit like that.
California.
I just quickly want to tell a story because I have met one of the heirs of the Miller Brewing Company fortune. And her name's Emily, and she's a 60-something year-old lesbian. And the deal was that old man Miller gave more money than God to the Catholic Church. And the rules of the bequest were that all of his descendants get 5 minutes a year with the Pope. Okay, and part of the descendants like Emily's inheritance is that they don't get any money, but anytime they want to study, they get their accommodation paid for, and they get their tuition fees paid, and they get 5 minutes with the Pope, and every year. And so Emily has parlayed this into a career with all sorts of organisations that desperately need to get some time with the Pope, and she'd be like, well, I've got my 5 minutes, and that's Miller Brewing Company. So yes. Okay, on that note, we are going to go to 10 minutes of Nick and Phil. Now, there are enormous tank noises happening in the background, and we chose to set up the sound so that they would be there. I think the vocals are still pretty clear, and we hope you enjoy the most influential tank nerds in the world talking to Rob while I wave a
camera at us.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Hi folks, it's Rob from Totally Tanked here. I'm at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum, and today we've got a very special treat. We've got Nick and Phil, the tank twins. Can I call you that?
Yeah.
Because you guys have restored and put together so many tanks. We're standing in front of them. One of them right now. This is the Hetzer. How do we feel? When did the Hetzer come across?
It was about late 14, something like that. Yeah.
Wow, so right at the beginning of the collection you brought
one of the first German tanks he had, yeah. There
you go. And we've had a couple of questions from our folks who wanted to hear you interviewed and said, you're Zimmermick, you're specialised in Panthers or something like that when you're at the...
Well, we kind of had a bit of experience with them. We did a Jag Panther complete for the Wield Foundation, or as it was my Gibbs collection then. And then all of a sudden we were with Bruce Crompton outfit, and the chance to do the Panther came up for Rob,
And you put together the Zimmermitt composition yourselves, because the original stuff is quite toxic and very flammable.
Yeah, we found an area on the tank when we were storing it which still had the original Zimmermitt on it. But then, because they all have their own pattern depending who made it, that's an M10 pattern. So we just copied that, and we found that floor tile adhesive and sawdust and PVA glue seemed to copy it quite well, so we just went with that.
And yesterday we were at the Oz Armour Museum yesterday for the parade. The Panther wasn't cranking over terribly well. How did that go?
Yeah, well, we gave up and just press the starter button. What normally happens is that you crank it up and then just pull this ring at the back and it engages the starter, the inertia starter. But where the ring goes through onto a rod through to the starter motor, the atmosphere up here, I think you just got it too damp and it's rusted. So we've got to work on that and free it all off. Probably might get it running for tomorrow. But at the moment, we just have to use
in World War II, in the actual field, how would they have normally started, with the crank, or would there some other way?
They prefer to go, well, they're advised to use the crank handle because the battery technology in them days was quite bad, so it did save the batteries for the radios and things like that.
And you've come across to the Oz Armour Fest today, or for the weekend. You've travelled a long way. You come out every year, and
yeah. We've this is about the 5th time I think we've been over. First one was to bring this, and then we came out again between times, and then Panzer I think was the next one we brought over, wasn't it? Unfortunately, that came over on the roll on roll off, which took about 6 weeks to get here.
And you were on the ship with it?
No. The idea is we fly out, but of course COVID came along, which stopped all that. So it was stuck here for nearly a year before we could get out here and commission it, which was a bit of a pain.
Now, for the question you have to ask all tank people in the world, what's their favourite? And for you folks, I'm going to ask, what's the most difficult tank you've had, or field that you've had, or like to talk about? I'll give you a second to think about that one.
Well, construction-wise, probably the flak.
So this is the
251 or 3-ton flak.
So this is the one you were saying before, is the only one in the world at the moment. So it's the unarmoured version of the 251 flak
chassis. Yeah, it's the chassis mainly a 3-ton chassis, unarmoured underneath, no belly armour at all. But all the superstructure is all armoured.
And you're saying that was the most difficult?
It was difficult in as much there's so much missing information-wise. Hilary Doyle did some really marvellous books, the Panzer Tracks series, and he'd already gone into a lot of the detail, sort of, which was useful, and he helped us a lot with some drawings and everything else. But unfortunately, there was a lot of gaps, especially on the interior. We trawled, and I think we managed to find about 40 photographs, original wartime photographs, which were sort of helpful and not in other ways. It's the usual thing, there's a guy standing in the way or something, and it doesn't really give you any size or anything like that. Eventually we managed to get our head around how all the seating position worked, how the rear facing seating worked, how the floor all folds in on itself, all the seats fold down inside, so that it gives you a bigger area to operate the gun from. And then there's storage under that, which is for spare wheel. There's gun racks underneath it for rifles. So there's a lot of information there, a huge amount, which was missing. So it was a bit of a job working all that one out. So it looks very similar to a 251, but the only parts you use from a 251, let's say the nose part, that's original. The rest of it, we had to figure it out.
And the heads are here behind us. Where did that come from?
I think it came from a museum in Germany somewhere. And it had been touted around a bit.
And you had to do all the restoration work on it?
Yeah, it was basically a G13, but slightly different to the normal G13s, because after the war they scooped up most of for the Swiss consignment of G13s. They were using a lot of what was already in the factories. So the only thing they didn't use was obviously the guns, because Rheinmetall had been blown up. That was the end of them. So they weren't supplying guns anymore. but the hulls were all just laying about. So this is actually a hull that was returned to the factory for refurb, and then they got involved in the G13 program. So it's actually got a wartime.
So it's gone forward. It's gone from a Hetzer to a G13, and then
back to a Hector again. Wow. And then we built the whole lot we managed to reproduce a complete 39 gun for it instead of the 40, which was the post-war gun. Used some of the parts out of the 40, which were similar, but a lot of it had to be remade. All the gearboxes and everything had to be remade. Wow. Big job. All to the end of the barrel. Normally they have a thread on the end, so that's all been put back as it would have been on the originals. All the gun sights and everything else changed back. They changed just about everything on a G13. There's not one square inch of this thing that hasn't been changed by the Swiss over the period of time.
And then you had to change it all back?
Yeah. We had to, I mean, when we got it, had huge amount of their way of disarming a tank was to lay some plastic in the back, get the engine out, lay some plastic in the back and fill it up with concrete. So it was just full of concrete. So I was in there with a breaker and broke it all out.
And so you said to get in there with a jackhammer and just break it all out?
Smash it all out. Wow. And of course there was lumps of timber and everything in there, so the old railway sleepers and everything.
The funny part about it is that they chucked a hook into the middle of it so you can pull it out, but with concrete it just goes into everything. There's no way it's going to come back out. It had to be broken up. It had to be broken up.
What about you, Nick? What do you think is the most challenging or your favourite?
The most challenging, I think, was the Panther. Yeah, that was
different ways, though, wasn't it? It was in different ways.
The biggest problem was the fact that we were under a time schedule on it, and 4 years is pretty quick for something that very intense. 4 years, almost full time. Evenings as well. You go home and you just trawl through the internet, getting the information we needed to make sure it's absolutely spot on.
Now, one last question, just before you have to get back to whatever fun things you're doing around here. Can you tell us anything about what you've got going on at the collection at the moment?
Well, at the moment we're consulting and making small detail parts for Kevin Wheatcroft through Tay Engineering, and they're doing 4 Hetzers at the moment.
4 Hetzers. We're mainly doing the detail work on them and consultation. They're throwing that at us, so they're basically feeding off us, which is great. We don't mind that. We'd rather do that than lose the information completely. And they've been very, very good. And they're making a superb job of it. We've got one more paint job to finish when we get home. That's an ambush job on the command vehicle. Okay. There'll be 4 of them in total. 2 Skodas, 2 BMMs. And they're all wartime hull.
All right. Any last words you'd like to throw in?
We just love being here. I wish I could live here.
Yeah. 20 years ago we'd have jumped at it, but not now.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you, and thanks to Australian Armour and Artillery Museum for having us and bringing you two out here to be able to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Sorry, screaming more Millers. All right, a big thank you to the twins for the interview and to all the folks who looked after us at Oz Armour Fest. Kurt, Graham, the staff, and the lovely caterers who always kept a beer ready for us.
And I got to say, it was so great that when we had ordered the Uber and there was a 20-minute wait for the damn thing to arrive, that the caterers we'd developed a special relationship with and just dropped the last 2 beers from the bottom of the esky on our table. That made us.
That was lovely. Yeah. That made us feel so special there. And an even bigger thank you to those folks who joined us in Cairns and the new friends we made along the way from Britta, Jacob, John, the Irish one, David, Warwick, and Gerard,
and Tony.
And Tony, a great bunch of folks to hang out with and have a beer and talk tanks. You made it for a great weekend and a fun experience. And thanks to Britta for suggesting the M10 for this experience, for this episode.
I do want to stress how great it is to go to a tank festival and watch the tanks go around and ride the tanks and then have a crew to go to the pub with and debrief with and just get a little loose and talk some bollocks. It's as good as life gets,
and
really.
Look, let's face it, there is a certain age of gentlemen who want to go to these things and their wives, friends, partners, children don't want to come with them, and they just want to go and ride tanks, and they want a crew, and we'll be there for you.
And like we had, we got to ride the Sherman Firefly for the Grand Parade, and there were 3 spots in the vehicle, and 80-year-old, 80-something Fred from Michigan was delightful company, and he was having the time of his life. So
I'm sure he didn't fall off.
Yeah,
there was a little.
there's some tricky things. All right, Rob, we need to thank the patrons.
All right.
Yes. Okay. So we have. Our patrons, the Artificer tier, they get the interview early and the ad-free video and audio of the show. We have Brian Jenkins, Pear, Cornelius Weber, Chris Peze, Anton Gorbanov, Maxi Mix, Chicago John, Hans Vormhat, Johnny Oot, Monty, The Rain Man, and Jacob Caban. Jacob's a new patron. Thank you, Jacob. I'm pretty sure it's the Jacob we met in Cairns as well. And then in the Apprentice tier, which is cheaper, but you do get the ad-free audio and video of the show, David Mulvaney, Scotch 12, Floaty Burb, Steve Matthews, Jamie Stokes, Guy Hook, Jay Beckman Strauth, Hans Wang, Henry Hammer, Dan Sepienza, Christoph Keller, Tony L, Elliot Spicer, Russell Phillips, Red Rum X, Callum, Steve Broomfield, and James Van Dyke. Just quickly on the patrons and Apple Bastardry, we want you to keep calm and carry on. And so I'm just putting up the video for the second half there. But it's best to use a web browser to join on Patreon rather than the Apple app, because they keep 30% of your money, which we'd rather have if that's okay with you. Also, check out totallytank.net to subscribe to the RSS feed or the mailing list so that we can stay in touch with you regardless of the horrible things that social media companies are doing. Right now. Okay, we've done the beer review. Rob, Oz Armour thoughts.
I just want to say Callum King met Nick Moran at WH Festival. WH.
Oh, we have Ways Festival.
Yeah,
yes.
There we go. And yeah, he's a lovely guy.
So Nick Moran says we are funny guys.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Good. I'm glad Nick thinks we're funny.
We are. We would like to think that we are. That is the audience we're aiming at. We're providing some joy.
Nick, if you're watching, we want you back on the show.
You might be busy because you actually have a lot more to do than we do. So.
Well, he has been commanding a unit in the US Army, but apparently that's coming to an end, so he might have a little more time to do things. With the Bradley episode, we kind of thought we might want to try and get Nick in there, and we sent him a message, and then by the time he got back to us, we'd already done the episode, but he was very apologetic and very nice about it. And we were like, don't worry, mate, we know you've actually been busy doing real stuff. So
he's probably busier than we are. All right, Oz Armour fun tanks, riding it. Where else in the world can you go to a tank festival, John, and jump in a tank and ride around it? There's a few places, but a place where you can have a different selection of tanks. It's not a case of just running around in the FAMO or something like this. It's a case of jumping in a T-55, a T-72, a Leopard, a Gepard, the Firefly, the 4 different versions of Panzer IVs. Yeah, you can jump at all these things and ride around them.
The thing we want to say about Oz Armour Fest is right now, in its current incarnation, you as a member of the public can get to ride the tanks. You don't need to be a special YouTuber. You don't need to be anyone famous. You just pay some money and they take you around in the tank. And I do not, as far as I'm aware, that doesn't happen at the other big tank festivals. So that's why we're, obviously as Australians, we're like, come to Cairns. We're supporting our, compatriots. But there is a big issue of being able to ride the tanks that we strongly recommend coming to Cairns. Although
it's a huge museum collection as well. You can just wander around and look at them.
It's enormous. Alan's saying every day in Las Vegas over 30 types. I think there's a bit more at Cairnsale, and you should come out and we'll have a beer with you and ride some tanks. But anywho, let's move on. Thoughts on it. The BMP one was a much smoother ride than I was expecting.
Yeah, okay.
The T55 was unbelievably rough. And the M3 Grant was rickety as hell. Obviously I'm famous for being a bit of a hater on the M3s, but I paid a lot of good money to ride one to have an authoritative opinion, and it was rougher than I thought it was going to be. And the Sherman Firefly was it was just so great. That was the thing that partly because of who we are and what we do, we got given a ride about in the Grand Parade.
Relationship with Kurt, basically, we've been in his ear all the time. He looked after us.
We had, but also we had spent 3 days of Commander's Deck tickets, which is not cheap, and that definitely bumps you up the priority rankings.
And I got to put away the Stug 4.
Yeah, well, we got video of Rob riding a Stug 4 into the museum while I was trying, because we were supposed to be going up into the commentary box, and Rob had just disappeared, and then I turn around, there he is, just riding a Stug 4 into the museum.
It's like, I'm enjoying being in this tank, but I'm supposed to be doing some commentary in a minute.
It's okay, it all worked out.
It did.
Yes.
Well, we've got, and we'll know better for next time we go, which who knows when that will be, but we'll definitely go again.
There's other ways to do things, and I've got thoughts about things, and the commentary box wasn't as great a position for the video as we thought it might be, but that's you only learn by doing. Yeah. Now, Rob, things that are happening in the world of tanks. There's been a story about the Condor Flak Panzer. It's basically a modernised version of Gepard. But the question is, certainly with the German designs at the moment, is that they're putting they're putting a 30mm autocannon, which is half of a Gepard, on top of everything. Turrets on turrets on turrets. But
it's not. It's only they're throwing it on top of the Boxer, but they're making it essentially this turret. The Condor Flak Panzer turret can be thrown on top of any sort of body that might be moving it, whether it's a Boxer, whether it's a Leopard 1 or something else. And it has the capabilities to, as long as you provide the power to it, it has capabilities to, say, detect drones coming in, shoot drones coming in, shoot anti-tank guided missiles coming in. So it's got the active protective systems, and just being all those sort of things that you can just throw on. And in case of, if you've got a platoon of 4 tanks, should this be the 4th tank to provide you the cover for the other 3 tanks? So you're taking out one main gun and then throwing in a Flak Panzer into the platoon, or is it a case of, or is there something else going on here?
I guess compared to the alternative, which is give every tank half of a Gepard's worth of air defense, it's a question of approach. But tanks' continued existence on the battlefield, I'm still firmly of the belief, is going to be as an electronic warfare node and as an anti-air node, just as warships that still exist on the high seas are there because they can clear the skies and they can win the electronic warfare duel. And I think, I could be wrong, but my current thinking on this is that is where the future of tanks is. They've got to be able to clear the skies. They've got to be able to dominate the spectrum. And the gun is, a tertiary priority in that.
Whatever direct fire gun you've got, it overcomes a lot of issues with that anti-tank
timing and jamming. Yeah,
anti-tank guided missiles cannot overcome. So basically, trees. You know what? Trees will stop an anti-tank guided missile. What they won't stop is a tank round, right? Yeah. And it'll just go straight through those trees and hit whatever targets on the other side of them. Whereas an anti-tank guided missile the wire will get cut, or they'll just blow up on the trees. There's a big difference between those sort of things. Okay, so you want your direct fire anti-tank your direct fire tank guns to be able to do things. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe your 4th tank in a platoon should be a Flak Panzer to provide that utility role that the other 3 tanks then don't need to try and do. Rather than having every tank try to be a flak tank, then just make, say, a quarter of the platoon should be.
Yeah, well, we will see how the future evolves on this. Better minds than us are going to have to deal with that.
It's
but yeah,
possibly better than. I mean, this is looking at when you're actually deploying tanks as a formation rather than a case of sending an individual tank out saying, right, go shell this area. Right, you're providing sending them out as the way they should be sent out under doctrine, rather than a case of, okay, we've only got one tank, we've got to send that out.
But yeah, that's the thing. Doctrine versus reality is always a question. Now, Rob, you want to talk about the Ghost Shark drone?
Yes, Ghost Shark drone. These are subs that were announced recently. Is that Australia is finally putting some money into buying the Ghost Shark submarine drones that they've been developing for a number of years. $1.5 billion for something that would arrive a lot sooner than AUKUS, and might actually be useful.
Look, you say that, but Palmer Luckey is the guy who owns Anduril, which is the US defense company doing this.
Was that a sword from Lord of the Rings or not?
Yes.
It's not Anduril. It's a different, slightly different one, but
it's the
It's
tech bros who think they like Lord of the Rings but don't understand it. Just like Ian M. Banks is obviously a subject for me. Tech bros love that and they obviously don't understand it. But the other problem with Palmer Luckey is I think he's a charlatan, and I don't believe we're going to get anything useful for our $1.5 billion here. But
it's only $1.5 billion.
Well,
it's not 368.
It's small.
It's not 368.
It's small beer in the money we waste on submarines, or not building submarines. But
and taking money out of the rest of the Defence Department budget, whereby they can't buy anything else except for.
Look, I would say everyone watching this show should just Google Palmer Luckey and take a look at him in his stupid Hawaiian shirts with his stupid little soul patch and ask yourself, is this someone you want to give billions of dollars to build defense assets? And as a pseudo-tech nerd myself, I don't think I'm worth $1.5 billion, and I don't think he is either. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I hope I am, because I'd hate to waste that kind of money.
Tell you what, these Miller Limes are growing on me as the more I drink. But then that could be just...
That's your tongue getting coated. Yeah. But yeah. All right, Rob, you want to talk about a dive wreck?
Yes.
Because you like diving.
I do.
I like diving, but I don't have my certificates. And go on. Tell us about it.
HMAS Adelaide diving wreck is wrecked. Not the new one we saw in Cairns.
So we saw the new HMAS Adelaide, the landing helicopter dock kind of sort of aircraft carrier. But yeah.
And we saw it in port, and we saw it shipping out of port
as we flew out.
We flew out. The old one was sunk. The previous HMS Adelaide frigate was sunk off the coast of
Which is a Oliver Hazard Perry derivative, I believe. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll say that. Off the coast of northern New South Wales as a dive site. When I saw that, I thought, they should have bloody sunk in Adelaide. But anyway, during a big storm last year, the aluminium superstructure, which is the top half of the ship, was broken off from the hull, and now large pieces of the ship are washing up on the beach, and now there are discussions as to who is going to clean up the mess. Plus, the dive site is closed as the broken superstructure is too dangerous to dive. So it really becomes a question of, look, it was a great idea, because as a diver, I love the idea of diving on wreck stuff, and I've done plenty of diving on military wrecks from World War II in Vanuatu and Fiji, and all sorts of other fun places. And it's a case of really $1 million point in Vanuatu was freaking hilarious. So that's where they basically the US Army has said, you know what, we're shipping home from here. We've got all this stuff that in Vanuatu that we don't need anymore. We're just going to dump it here on this into this reef and see you later. And huge amounts of stuff. Anyway, so for the Australian military to decide that we're going to drop this ship here and make it a dive site. It was a great idea.
All you do is building an artificial reef. It's not necessarily going to be a pristine museum once you've dropped it underwater, particularly after a SINKEX.
The fact that they didn't think about what happens if a big storm comes through and rips it in half, and then what that does to it, and all the bits and pieces. Big bits and pieces of aluminium washing up on these beaches.
This is why you need a scrap metal industry. Someone will come and take that away to not worry you.
But now, who's going to pay for that?
The scrapper pays for it because they want to sell the metal for its value. Now, guys, we want to quickly talk to the young men in our audience, and we know there's a bunch of you. I want to repeat the words of Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, that ends are means in the making. So we do not want to see any of you in the news wearing a totally tanked t-shirt for anything regrettable. Society has alienated you, and the answer is in community solidarity rather than feeding into the oligarchy's strategy of tension. So help your neighbours, join a union, make friends, attend lawful protests, make connections.
Come to tank.
Come to tank festivals and we'll buy you some beers. Look, it's often boring and hard work and other people are endlessly disappointing, but shooting symptoms won't help against the disease. And that's about as far as we're willing to go on this, even though we're probably going to be cancelled on YouTube by the end of the year as the cultural purges continue.
RSS feeds, boys and girls, that's where we'll be at.
Yeah.
All right, Aussie Abrams in Ukraine.
Yeah. So
they finally arrived. They're in combat.
They've actually got there. And one of the interesting things for us is that the Ukrainians were immediately saying, oh my God, we can just fuel these up with diesel instead of having to put aviation fuel into them. Now, that's interesting because everyone always talks about how the Abrams turbine can run on any sort of fuel, but you have to tell it what sort of fuel it's getting and optimize it for it. And the fact that the Ukrainians are thrilled with getting diesel-powered Abrams is interesting in that it suggests it's not as trivial as some sources would suggest to change fuel. Because it would appear that the Ukrainians couldn't make the American donated Abrams, the paltry, 31 of them, run on diesel, whereas the ones that we sent them that we...
59? 79? Something like that.
I thought it was fewer than that, but anyway. The amount we sent to them was a bigger number.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's what I'm saying. We sent either 59 or 79.
Yeah. So much more, and they run on diesel, which the Ukrainians have. So huzzah! China's big parade day, Rob.
Not led by the Gongqing tank of the
Gongqing tank. No. It's a shame. That would have been really cool. But mind you, I mean, anyway, it was much better drill than Trump's big parade. Like they actually knew how to march, as opposed to the US Army today.
The US Army one, they know how to march. It's a case of
the guys they put down the parade ground didn't know how to march.
They knew how to march.
They were just slouching along.
They weren't. It wasn't a case of a slow or a quick march situation. Mm-hmm. I just want to throw in here.
Ron Pettigrew's commented, hello, Ron.
Hello, Ron.
His just was 49 that the...
Gongqing tank?
No, that was about the Australian sent.
Oh, okay. Right.
Anyway, yes. So, it was a better parade.
With much more impressive kit.
Yes, and does that mean anything? No, parade ground drill doesn't win battles, doesn't win wars.
But I'm just going to throw in the fun one here, is bagpipes. So
Chinese love bagpipes.
So when you're marching around the parade ground in slow time, and that's on the drum beat, it's when you get the call of bagpipes and drums, change to quick time. That's a case of when you actually change to quick time. That the change from slow march, which is really draining to march around the parade ground in slow time, change to quick time. That's when the first thing you hear as you're about to change to quick time march is the skirl of the bagpipes as they start airing up and ready to go. And so the bagpipes and drums getting ready to go to quick time is always a good thing when you're on the parade ground, and then suddenly away you go.
Yeah.
So I always liked the bagpipes for that. It was a case of, it's a change from slow time march to quick time.
So of the thing for us as a tank podcast, the most interesting thing was the Type 100, which was debuted in this parade, which I'm kind of thinking of as a mini Armada, in that it's a unmanned turret and a 3-man crew in the body of the tank. And
yet, when they were going around, the crew was actually standing out of the turret. I know, but that's where you stand. The turret hatches are only openable from the inside, not from the outside, is what they said. So you can basically, the crew moves from the...
I thought that was normal for tank. Anyway, fine. Yeah. But there's some things that come out. One of the is that the Chinese GL6 active protection system, does it work or doesn't it? We don't know. If it does work, then it's the fact they're being able to deploy it in mass as the way that the Chinese can build at levels no one else can anymore is interesting.
Look at their shipping situation.
Yeah. The other thing is that they've gone with the 105mm main gun, and remember...
Automatic gun, yeah.
Sure. It's not a British L7, but remember that the British did license the L7 to China, and it's definitely had a design influence. The Chinese are basically saying that with their new nanotechnology steels, a 105 gun can take the
roll of the 120 or 125.
Yeah, the breach pressures to deliver an effective penetrator. So that's interesting. Whether it's true, we don't know. We have no way to know.
We're hoping we'll never find out.
So it was interesting, and they've also built to a 40-ton weight limit, which we've said on this show a lot that 40 tons is as much as any tank should weigh, because it has to be able to go over road bridges, and road trucks have a 40-ton weight limit, so bridges are built to that 40-ton weight limit, and so if you want to have a useful tank, you probably need to keep it in that 40 tons. Now, we've picked up a lot of listeners in Beijing in the last year, and it's nice to feel that we've had some input into them, so that's good news. Rob, what are we doing for the next beer?
We got more Millers.
Oh.
There you go. All right. New T80 production at Omsk is so far putting together old bits, not new. So basically, the Russians, having lost a lot of tanks in Ukraine, have been saying, "Oh, we're building new T80s and we're rolling them out." What it actually was is that they had a lot of They had a lot of parts. So their last production run was 2001. The last time they actually built anything was 1991. So between that 10-year period, they had a lot of parts sitting around, and now they were putting them together as new tanks and calling them new tanks and saying, but they weren't actually building anything new. Now, the tanks because they've lost so many T80s in Ukraine, and they've got no more stockpile of them. They are now they're now saying that they've restarted the production line in Omsk. Yep. And we're wondering whether or not that's actually true and how many they're actually producing, because nobody's actually believing them when they say, "Oh yes, we're building new tanks here and we're building 100 a month." Whereas I think they're saying the intelligence reports on the interwebs are saying, "Yeah, no, they're getting 100 a year." And none of these tanks are newly built. They are basically the components being put together and where they go. So because they can't produce, they can't manufacture anything, and they don't have the parts for putting them together. And even the Chinese don't have the parts to be able to sell them to put new things into these tanks.
Certainly the T80, the Chinese have never had that tooling. But for all that, it's worth noting that the UK and the United States haven't built a new tank chassis in decades either. The Challenger 3 is just upgrades to Challenger 2s. The US has been working with its stockpile of M1s. So it's really weird that there just aren't any new build tanks except for coming out of Korea and Germany, which is where manufacturing kind of lives these days. All right, Rob, what do you think about the Battle of Pokrovsk? Because it looks like there are tank armies massing for this.
No, I don't believe that. Look, the Russians are going to do what the Russians do, which is basically any sort of strong point. They will set up So Pokrovsk is a Ukrainian town that's basically been built as a strong point.
Citadel. Yeah.
Citadel to stop the Russians getting in there. And the Russians are doing what they've done with every other strong point, is a case of, move up to it, set up a defensive line or an aggressive defensive line in front of it, and then swing around the wings of it from both sides to cut off the supply lines. And once they're in a bull's horn formation around the city, they will then shell any supply lines coming in so that there are no supplies available, and at which point the Ukrainian says, well, there's no point staying here because we've got no supplies coming in, we can't fight back, so we may as well pull out, and at which point the Russians then move in. So any writings on the big battle of Pokrovsk coming, being a big tank battle and the consolidation of forces there, I don't think so. But then again, who am I to know? I've just been looking at what they've done in the last 3 years in Ukraine of that's exactly how they've done it. But I'm assuming that's how they're going to do it again.
I'm finding it a bit interesting that apparently the Russians massed a lot of tanks, and then they looked at all the Ukrainian drones, and the tanks said, "We're not going there." And
well, they would just be used as
but
artillery.
The drones, as you know, they're talking about the Ukrainian drone walls are functionally minefields, and just like with any minefield, you need to have a plan.
Sneeze. Excuse me.
Go on then.
I'll see.
I'll drop it out.
There'll be a third one coming in just a sec.
All right. So, but the issue is that the drone wall or a minefield, you need to have a way to deal with that, and that involves an investment in time and capability and training in large numbers of people able to destroy drones or deal with mines. If you don't have a plan to do that, then your plan is to just throw enough assets at it that they blow up all the they detonate all the obstacles, and it's a bit like every atoll in the South Pacific. To this day, you navigate the entrance to the atoll by steering between the wrecked American landing craft and the. Similarly, you can pile your bodies high enough to climb over a wall. World War Z was probably the great encapsulation of it. It's a terrible strategy, though. What you actually need is a plan to deal with the obstacle.
What was the web series with the pile of bards dying in a D&D series, and basically formed a wall for the... Anyway, yeah.
Let's move on.
Let's move on.
So I just want to quickly note the radicalisation of John Lyons, who in Australian television, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation is the government-owned broadcaster, and John Lyons is a big foreign affairs, national security brain, and very much of the US side of things. He's cultivated US sources, has built his career. But they sent him to Israel a couple of years ago, and he ended up getting pulled out because he kept getting in fights with soldiers and settlers who were trying to murder children. And it was quite funny. He'd walk up to them saying, it's a war crime to shoot at children," and they'd be like, "You look a little too white for us to just murder, and can you just go away?" Anyway, so they moved him to Washington, D.C., and there's been hilarious video of him trying to ask Donald Trump about his business dealings, with Trump saying, "You are doing enormous damage to Australia by asking me these questions."
So Trump's going to tell on him when he supposedly meets our Prime Minister next week.
Yeah.
Which
I think Albo knows. He doesn't need Trump to tell him that.
Yeah, he's I mean, what's he going to do? Cancel our sub deal?
That he's not going to deliver on anyway.
Yeah, that'd be great. We've got all the rare metals and minerals and so forth. So it's a case of, look, we're just trying to survive the situation. We're not going to try and excel from it and engage in too much. Anyway. But anyway, that brings us to the end of our episode. Let's have a look at our poll. We've had 18 votes. The M10 was poorly conceived junk, only 11%, and the right vehicle, the right time, which is the correct vote from my point of view,
so
at 89%.
I believe that represents 2 votes for poorly conceived junk and the rest for the right vehicle at the right time, which I think even the greatest fans of the M10 would agree that a better weapon would have been great. The idea of using the M4 chassis and...
Just remember, when you're going... at that stage in the war, they were going from a 37mm gun to a 75 to this 76. No, because the 75 was mounted on the half-track. To a 76, and they said, well, the 76mm round is so much bigger than the 75 and the 37. It's obviously going to meet all expectations for the next however long. And as you said, if they come in earlier into the war, then who knows what could have happened. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, folks, it's been fantastic having you with us this far along the line, and we as always, we have a special place in our hearts for the live stream viewers, but we totally appreciate that most of you are listening on the podcast, and you are the wind beneath our wings. And
but this is a tank podcast, not planes.
Yeah. The wind beneath our tanks. Anyway, we are going to love you and leave you at this point. Thank you, Brandon, who's enjoyed the show, and everyone else. And look, We're hoping to get to Europe in the next couple of years for tank season, but we'll, yeah. Well, it's a hope, Rob. It's a hope.
Right.
If the patron money keeps coming in, then you know, who knows what we can afford to do. But on that note, we're going to disappear, and we hope you guys have a
Thank you
fantastic
all, and
time.
take care.
Thanks, Warwick. All right, cheers, guys.